Hello everyone, this is Murli Mohan here. I have 12 years of experience into IT industry. I'm running a company called Clahan Technologies. With all my experience, I would like to share about what is exactly DevOps. If you want to become a DevOps engineer, what are the steps that we need to follow? It is altogether is called as a DevOps roadmap. Here, I'm going to simplify, I'm going to explain each and every step clearly. What are the steps that we need to follow to become a DevOps engineer? Here, in this video, you are going to get complete end-to-end roadmap to become a DevOps engineer. I'm going to simplify into the different modules. In the first module, we are going to talk about what is the primary skill set that required to become a DevOps engineer. The first module which required, it is very essential to understand what is application, how the application is going to work. In application, what is exactly mean by a three-tier architecture? That means what is mean by web tier, what is application tier, what is mean by database tier, where you are going to store your data, how we are going to retrieve your data. So here, once you understood about very clearly about what is application, what is data architecture, then you have to understand what is meant by microservices. Nowadays, all the applications are microservices based applications. You take Flipkart, Flipkart has 602 microservices. You take Amazon, you take Swiggy, you take Zomato. So these are the most useful applications where the customers every day they are going to use. But you have to understand what is meant by microservices, how the microservices are going to work, and how the microservices are going to be communicate with each other. See, you are not going to work as a developer, but all DevOps engineers are going to deploy, manage these applications. So you have to understand how these particular applications are going to communicate each other. I mean to say microservices are going to communicate with each other. And what is meant by API? What is meant by API gateway? See, this primary understanding is very important for us. So, because most of the people, they are doing mistake in this particular module, because the primary understanding is very important to become a DevOps engineer. If you really don't have idea about what is application, how microservices are going to work, how this particular API gateway work, so you have to concentrate, understand first what is exactly mean by microservices. So once you understood about the first module, I am moving to the second module. Second module, it is all about the understanding about the Linux servers, because our production environments all are Linux based servers, because Linux servers are open source and it is very secure. That is the reason most of the customers, with my experience, I am telling that what are the applications so far I have delivered, deployed, managing in Clahan Technologies, all applications are working on the Linux servers. So you have to understand what is meant by Linux, how Linux architecture is going to work, and you have to get good understanding about the Linux commands, because Linux servers are command line interface. If you want to talk with Linux servers, you should know about what language that you are going to, understand this particular Linux servers. That means you have to get good knowledge on the Linux commands and shell scripting, because most of the tasks that we are going to automate by using the shell scripting. See, for example, I have a dev environment, I have a test environment, I have a UAT environment, I have a production environment. See, for example, as a DevOps engineer, I want to move these particular Docker images from dev to test environment, from test to UAT environment, from UAT to production environment. I don't want to do it manually. I want to automate these tasks moving from the dev to a test environment my Docker images? Definitely, we have to use shell scripting files. So shell scripting, Python is playing very crucial role in a DevOps, because many of this particular XYZ people are going to or talk about we don't require the shell scripting, we don't require the Python scripting. But with my experience, I'm sharing with you guys, shell scripting is one of the most skill set which essential to learn to become a DevOps engineer. And also you have to understand how these particular Linux servers are going to work. See, based on the customer demand, customer may deploy the application on Linux servers, customers may deploy the application on Ubuntu servers, customers may deploy application on Red Hat Linux servers. It depends on their requirement, but you have to understand how these Linux servers are going to work, how you have to work the Linux servers. So this is one of the most essential skill set to become a DevOps engineer. Once you understood about the Linux servers, Linux environment, the third module I'm moving towards it. See, third module, it is all about you have to understand networking part. See, most of the DevOps, we are going to work on the networking side. So here you have to understand how we are going to work with the security perspectives, because understanding about networking is very, very important, because you have to get idea about what is meant by OSI layers, what is meant by TCP/IP layers, and what is meant by protocols, what are the different types of protocols that we have, which protocol when we have to use, and what are the port numbers that we have to understand. Because whenever you want to expose any application outside the world, it could be from Kubernetes cluster, it could be from Linux server, it doesn't matter about it. You have to understand how we are going to expose application to the every microservices are going to work in different port numbers. That means you should have good idea about like what is exactly meant by networking, how these particular services are going to communicate each other. This idea you have to understand. That is the reason third most essential skill set that required to become a DevOps engineer is a networking part. My sincere request is understand networking. Here you have to understand what is meant by L7 load balances, what is meant by L4 load balances, which is a cost effective, which load balance are going to work where it is. So this understanding is very, very important. So here you have to focus on the networking side. So once you have understood about the networking part, I'm moving towards something it is called as a module 4. So here in the module 4, you have to understand how cloud works. I mean to say what is meant by cloud, how the cloud works, what is meant by data centers, what is meant by regions. So you may start with any of the cloud, but my suggestion with my experience is start with the AWS, because AWS is user friendly and we can able to easily learn AWS. Now many of the people going to suggest learn cloud computing, but you don't know about what need to learn in the cloud computing, right? I'm here to help what are the services that you need to learn in cloud computing. So in a cloud computing is basically first you have to understand about the VPC. If we go to the AWS, if we go to Azure, if we go to that GCP, if we go to Oracle Cloud, if we go to Alibaba Cloud, IBM, it doesn't matter. All the cloud, first you have to understand what is meant by VPC. because whenever you are going to landing zone, you choose landing zone as AWS. Now every customer applications that we have to deploy in a secure environment. That is the reason first you have to create a VPC. Then my request is to move on to the EC2 service. EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Compute. Here, this service is going to help you to create a virtual machines, because whenever you are going to dealing with the cloud, you have to understand how we have to create a servers. See, client may require ask you to create a Windows machine. Client may require to ask you to create a Ubuntu machine, Amazonic machine. It doesn't matter. First, we have to understand how to create a EC2 instances. So once you understood about EC2, then you have to understand what is meant by launch templates. So because whenever I want to perform auto scaling in the cloud, so one of the most skill set that we require to understand about the launch templates. Once you understand about templates, then start work on the auto scaling groups. I mean to say how auto scaling groups is required, how it is going to work. So here you have to follow a couple of steps to perform auto scaling. Here you have to understand what is meant by vertical scaling, what is meant by horizontal scaling. So all these things that we have to understand very clearly one by one. So once you understood about EC2, next you have to understand what is meant by database. How database is required for us. Here there is a two kind of databases that we have. One is a structured database and one is a unstructured database. See, for this AWS is offering two different kind of services. One is RDS, second one is a DynamoDB. You have to understand what is meant by RDS, you have to understand what is meant by DynamoDB. So here depends on the customer requirement. You may choose RDS, you may choose DynamoDB here. So once you understand about these particular things, then we have to move on to the next service. So next service is all about, you have to understand it is nothing but Route 53. So Route 53 is nothing but like how we can able to create a DNS. So whenever you wanted to expose any application towards the internet, we require domain. So we have to understand how we can able to purchase domain, how we can able to map your elastic IP address to the DNS record A, or how we can able to map this particular load balancer DNS to the Route 53 record A. You have to understand how we can able to create a route in Route 53, how to create a record A services, how to create record AAA services. So this is very, very important to understand how we can able to map your elastic IP address to your domains or load balance to the your domain mapping. This is very, very important. Next, you have to understand SNS service or SQS service. SNS is nothing but like simple notification service, which you have to understand how we can able to send notification to your customers, or you can use SQS services. See, once we have done with SNS or SQS, then we have to move on to the service called as a monitoring services. I mean to say, once you deployed any application in AWS, you have to understand monitoring services. Nothing but like how is my application is behaving and how is my application is functionality is working, how much resources that we are going to consuming by my application. To understand all these services in AWS, it is going to provide the service name, it is called as a cloud watch service. This is one of the most important service that we have to understand as per the monitoring perspective. Nothing but if you want to perform the observability, if you want to perform the monitoring, this is very, very important. So once we have understood everything, you are not going to provide admin access to all the users. Let's say, for example, I have a DevOps engineer. In a DevOps engineers, there are 2 or 3 DevOps engineers are there for the project. I'm not going to provide admin access to all the DevOps engineers. Let's say I have DevOps, development team I have. In a development team, I have 5 software developers are there. I'm not going to provide, admin access to all the 5 software developers. Depends on the requirement. Let's, for example, my developer required the EC2 instance services. You have to understand how to restrict all other services. For that restrictions, for security perspective, in AWS, it is going to provide a service name. It is called as a IAM service. IAM stands for Identity Access Management. This service is very, very important. You have to understanding about like how these services are going to be work. Next one, I'm going to talk about something. It is called as a object-based storage. What is exactly mean by object-based storage? I hope you understood about Netflix, right? So Netflix is where it is going to store all their movies. For example, you want to watch Bollywood movies, Tollywood movies, or any Tollywood movies or Sandalwood movies. It doesn't matter about which movie that you wanted to watch. So here Netflix is going to use in AWS the service name. It is called as a S3 buckets. It is nothing but like object based storage. We can store any kind of data in this particular S3 buckets. It is a cost effective. We can able to store the data and we can able to provide access to any of the users. In the perspective of the cost, it is also very less. That is the reason Netflix are using the AWS S3 services. And also you have to understand what is meant by serverless. So this all the skill set that required in a cloud a platform. Once you understood about AWS services, you have to understand how to automate this infrastructure by using a Terraform script. See, any environment that you want to create, it could be a dev environment, it could be a test environment, it could be a UAT environment, it could be the production environment. It doesn't matter, all DevOps engineers are going to setting up the infrastructure by using the Terraform script. So first, what will happen in DevOps industry? Before you are going to deploy any application, what DevOps engineers are going to do? This understanding is very, very important. See, we have a DevOps architect where it is going to create the architecture of the environment. I mean to say like how your security will be, how my customers are going to access our application, and where you are going to deploy your application, and where I am going to store my data. So how my application server is going to communicate to the database server. See, all this perspective, DevOps architect will think about it and they are going to design a architecture. I mean to say, you have a developer and you have a development team and you have a development architecture. So here, the same way in DevOps also we have something it is called as a DevOps architecture. See, whenever the client send requirement to us, we are going to understand the requirements and after that you are going to draw the architecture. See, for that architecture, what you do, you are going to create a infrastructure. So how we are going to create an infrastructure? With help of the Terraform script. So Terraform is one of the most essential skill set which is looking in the IT industry right now in the market. So here, before you are going to move on to the module 5, you have to understand what exactly mean by DevOps. You have to understand why DevOps is required. In DevOps, there are many tools that we have in the market, but I'm just going to list out some of the tools as per my experience, what exactly really industry is looking for. How Git and GitHub it is going to work. Especially you have to understand branching strategies. What is meant by PR request? What is meant by branch or production rules? What is exactly a GitHub webhook? So once you understood about this version control, then you have to understand it is all about how we have to build the application. Before you're going to build the application, you have to understand security perspective. Here to check the code quality, you may use a SonarQube server, you may use a check mark. Here depends on the client requirement, we may use different tools. So once you understand about the security, in a SonarQube server, basically everybody will scan the code, but we have to understand how we can able to create a custom quality profiles. Nothing but how to create a custom quality gates, because every project will have a separate quality gates. So once you understand about all these things, then you have to understand what is exactly mean by build. So here, when you are going to use different programming languages, we are going to use different build tools. See, for example, you are going to use something, it is called as a Java. We are going to use Maven. You are going to use something, it is called as a Node.js. You are going to use something, it is called as a NPM. See, every programming language, we have different build tools. With the build tool, you are going to build a package. So once we understood about the build tools, how we have to create a packages, we have to understand where we can able to store the packages. See, for that, you have to understand what is exactly mean by Nexus. Because most of the customers to store their artifacts, to store their third party libraries, we are going to use something, it is called as a Nexus or JFrog. So here all these are very important, but the most important tools nowadays, the world moving towards the containerization and orchestration. Here you have to understand what is meant by Docker, what is the containerization, how we can write the Docker files, how we can able to build the Docker images, how we can able to create a Docker compose file to understand how the different microservices are going to work, how it is going to communicate. See, for all these things, understand microservice is very important, because every microservice will have a separate Docker image, separate database. You have to understand how this particular application it is going to be Dockerized. So once you understood this one, we are moving towards something it is called as a Kubernetes. Kubernetes is called as a KATIS. It is nothing but like orchestration tools, because it is one of the most essential, much demanded tool in the market called as a Kubernetes. So once you understood about these particular tools, then my suggestion is focus on the CI/CD process. Because CI/CD is heart of the DevOps. Because if you want to automate the complete build process, deployment process, for that we have to set up something it is called as a automation pipeline. See, for that you may use Jenkins, you may use GitOps model. See, once deployment is over, then you start understanding how your application is going to be behaving and how the application is behaving. For that we have to focus on the monitoring tools. Here we have something it is called as a Grafana, Prometheus. See, Grafana is a visualization tool. Prometheus is nothing but like it is a data collector. It is going to collect all the data, whatever it is going to happening in your environment. Hello, we have to understand what is meant by observability part here. Observability is mainly focusing on the how the application is going to be behaving, how to understand the logs, traces, metrics. For that we can use ELK stack, or else we can use a Datadog, or we can use a Dynatrace. So we have different tools for monitoring. So here, once you have understood about this complete stack, then there is other tool that we have something it is called as a Ansible for the configuration management. It is a Red Hat product. Most of the customers are going to use Ansible for configuration management. So all these tools are very important. So once you understood about this particular DevOps tools, then focus on the security. Security is one of the most concerned liabilities in the market. See, for SaaS, we can use SonarQube server. For scanning the Docker images, we may use a Trivi over there. And after deployment, you want to scan the runtime applications, we are going to use something, it is called DAST, Dynamic Application Security Testing. For this, we are going to use something, it is called as a OSAP and OSAP JAP. This is very, very important for us. So my sincere request is to focus on the security perspective all. So, whatever that you have heard so far, each and every skill set is very much required, important. Without learning all this skill set, definitely you can't able to crack any DevOps interview. Why? Because nowadays industry is expecting a practical guy rather than the theory guy, because you have to make your hands dirty. That means a lot of hands-on required. You take or you can build your own application by using AI tool. We can use ChatGPT or Lovable.ai or Leap.new. There are many AI tools which is going to help you to build microservices. By using a prompts, you can create your own applications, or there are open source applications like we have Google, IBM, open source applications. You take those applications, you have to understand how we can able to automate this application deployment, how to set up infrastructure for this particular application. You have to try by your own. So my request is focus more on the practical rather than the theory. This is one of the skill set that industry is expecting from the people. Once you lost the opportunity, you had to wait for a longer time. That is the reason in this video I have very clearly explained each and every point what you need to focus to become a DevOps engineer. You might seen many DevOps roadmap videos, but we want to show the difference, what compared with the others. That is the reason we have put a lot of efforts to do this video to make you understand what are the services that really you want to learn to become a DevOps engineer. Please watch our YouTube channel for more DevOps insights. Like, subscribe, comment, and share.